Captain Jake Sullivan had attended precisely 12 diplomatic functions in his 5-year career with the Earth Colonial Alliance, and each one had taught him that the universe was full of customs that made absolutely no sense to anyone except the people practicing them. The Zephyrian royal court, however, was setting new standards for elaborate ceremonial complexity that made Centaurian tea rituals look like casual coffee breaks. The throne room of the Crystal Palace stretched before him like a cathedral made of living light, its walls carved from some translucent mineral that caught and refracted the illumination from floating energy spheres. Hundreds of Zephyrian nobles filled the space, their formal robes shimmering with embedded circuits that displayed family crests and political affiliations in ever-shifting patterns. The entire scene looked like someone had crossed a medieval court with a high-tech light show. Jake adjusted his diplomatic credentials for the third time, trying to project the confidence expected of an Earth representative while privately wondering why anyone thought sending a mid-level courier to negotiate with royalty was a good idea. His mission was straightforward enough: deliver a data crystal containing Earth's latest trade proposals, receive Queen Lysara's response, and return home with hopefully positive news about expanded commercial partnerships. Simple diplomatic courier duty, Admiral Chen had said during his briefing. The Zephyrians value protocol, so be polite, follow their customs, and don't start any interstellar incidents. Jake was beginning to suspect that "don't start any interstellar incidents" might be more challenging than anticipated. Queen Lysara stood at the center of the court, positioned on a raised platform that seemed to be carved from a single enormous crystal. She was tall, even by Zephyrian standards, with the silver hair and luminous skin characteristic of her species. Her eyes shifted color as Jake watched, from deep blue to amber to silver, which he remembered from his cultural briefings indicated complex emotional states that humans weren't equipped to interpret. What concerned him more than alien mood indicators was the obvious tension crackling through the assembled court. Nobles clustered in distinct groups, their body language suggesting political factions rather than unified support for their queen. Jake caught fragments of whispered conversations in Zephyrian, his translation implant providing context that made him increasingly uncomfortable. Succession protocols clearly state: without a consort, the crown passes to Prince Valerian has military support. Ancient law cannot be ignored. Jake's diplomatic training had covered many scenarios, but walking into the middle of a succession crisis hadn't been among them. He was beginning to understand why Admiral Chen had looked so relieved to send someone else on this particular mission. A herald announced his presence in formal Zephyrian, and the court's attention turned toward him like a spotlight finding its target. Jake walked forward with what he hoped was appropriate diplomatic dignity, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. "Your Majesty," he said, offering the formal bow his cultural briefings had specified. "I bring greetings from the Earth Colonial Alliance and our latest trade proposals for your consideration." Queen Lysara's eyes settled on Silver as she regarded him, and Jake felt the weight of several hundred alien gazes analyzing his every movement. The silence stretched long enough that he began wondering if he'd accidentally violated some protocol that would require him to apologize to multiple governments. "Captain Sullivan," the Queen said, her voice carrying clearly through the crystalline acoustics of the throne room. "Your arrival is most fortuitous." Jake relaxed slightly. Fortuitous sounded positive, or at least not diplomatically catastrophic. "The Earth Colonial Alliance," Queen Lysara continued, her tone growing stronger, "has demonstrated remarkable wisdom in their latest communication." Jake blinked. The trade proposals were straightforward enough, but he wasn't sure they qualified as remarkable wisdom. "Thank you, Your Majesty. We value our relationship with the Zephyrian people." "Indeed," the Queen said, stepping down from her crystal platform with fluid grace. "So much so that your government has agreed to our proposed political alliance." A murmur rippled through the court, and Jake felt the first stirring of concern. Political alliance hadn't been mentioned in his briefing materials, which had focused exclusively on commodity exchanges and shipping protocols. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty," he said carefully, "but I believe there may be some confusion. My mission concerns trade agreements." "The marriage alliance," Queen Lysara said, her voice cutting through his explanation like a blade through diplomatic protocol. Earth has accepted our proposal for a union between our royal house and your diplomatic corps. The court's murmur became an audible gasp, and Jake felt his world tilt sideways like a ship caught in an unexpected gravitational field. Marriage alliance? He was a courier carrying trade proposals, not a diplomatic sacrifice for interspecies politics. Your Majesty, he began, his voice slightly higher than regulation diplomatic tones, I think there's been a significant misunderstanding. Queen Lysara reached into her robes and withdrew a ring that seemed to contain liquid starlight held in a golden setting. The court fell completely silent as she held it up for everyone to see. Captain Sullivan, she said, her eyes now blazing amber with what Jake's cultural training suggested was either determination or impending violence, will you accept this token of our alliance? Jake stared at the ring, at the Queen's intense expression, at the hundreds of alien nobles watching his every reaction. His diplomatic training provided exactly zero guidance for this situation, falling somewhere between unprecedented crisis and career-ending disaster. Put the ring on and tell everyone we're married, human, Queen Lysara said quietly, her tone leaving no room for refusal while somehow managing to sound like both a command and a desperate plea. The court held its collective breath as Jake realized that his simple courier mission had just become the most complicated diplomatic situation of his career. He could refuse, expose whatever misunderstanding had led to this moment, and probably create an interstellar incident that would make his name infamous in diplomatic circles for generations. Or he could slide the ring onto his finger and wonder what kind of storm he'd just stepped into. Jake looked at Queen Lysara's face, caught the brief flicker of vulnerability beneath her royal composure, and made the kind of split-second decision that either ended careers or changed the course of history. He took the ring. The golden band slid onto his finger with a warmth that seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, and Jake heard himself saying words that would echo through both their lives, I accept this honor, Your Majesty. The court erupted in a mixture of cheers, gasps, and what sounded like several different kinds of alien political protests, but Jake only heard the soft exhale of relief from the Queen who had just made him the most surprised fake husband in galactic history. The private chambers of Queen Lysara resembled what Jake imagined the inside of a geode might look like if geodes came with comfortable furniture and excellent security systems. Crystalline walls curved around them in organic patterns, while floating light sources provided gentle illumination that somehow adjusted automatically to human vision requirements. It was beautiful, sophisticated, and absolutely nothing like the sterile government offices where Jake usually conducted his diplomatic business. You can breathe now, Queen Lysara said, her voice considerably less regal than it had been in the throne room. The recording crystals in here are disabled, and my personal guards are loyal to me rather than the various political factions trying to overthrow my government. Jake realized he'd been holding his breath since entering the chamber, which probably wasn't the most diplomatic of reactions. Your Majesty, I think we need to discuss what just happened out there. Please, call me Lysara, she said, settling into a chair that seemed to form itself from the crystalline floor to accommodate her perfectly. And yes, we absolutely need to discuss the fact that I just declared you my consort without any warning, explanation, or prior consultation with your government. That's one way to put it, Jake agreed, looking down at the ring on his finger. The golden band continued to pulse with soft warmth, and he could swear he felt something like a gentle vibration coming from it. Is this thing supposed to be doing something? Zephyrian bonding rings are designed to facilitate emotional resonance between partners, Lysara explained. They're mostly ceremonial, but they do create a mild empathic link that helps with communication. Jake paused in his examination of the ring. Empathic link? Nothing invasive, Lysara assured him quickly. You might sense strong emotions from me, and vice versa, but thoughts remain private. It's meant to help couples navigate the complexities of formal court life. Right, Jake said, trying to process the fact that he was now wearing alien technology that connected him telepathically to a queen he'd met 15 minutes ago. This is definitely not covered in standard diplomatic training. Lysara's eyes shifted to what Jake was beginning to recognize as an amused silver. I imagine not. Jake, may I call you Jake? I owe you an explanation for what I just put you through. An explanation would be good, Jake agreed, settling into a chair that obligingly formed itself around him. Starting with why you told your entire court that Earth agreed to a marriage alliance that, as far as I know, nobody from my government has ever heard of. Because, Lasara said, her eyes darkening to blue, I'm facing a constitutional crisis that could lead to civil war, and you just provided me with the only solution that doesn't involve either abdicating my throne or watching my people tear themselves apart. Jake felt a flutter of something through the ring, not quite an emotion, but an echo of one. Worry, perhaps, mixed with determination and what might have been desperation. According to ancient Zephyrian law, Lasara continued, an unmarried ruler who reaches the age of 300 cycles must either take a consort or transfer the crown to their nearest eligible relative. 3 days ago, I celebrated my 300th cycle birthday. And your nearest eligible relative is? My cousin, Prince Valerian, Lasara said, and even Jake's limited empathic connection could feel the spike of frustration that accompanied the name. Who has spent the last 50 cycles building support among the military faction for aggressive expansion into human territory. Jake's diplomatic training finally kicked in, providing context for the political undercurrents he'd sensed in the throne room. So if you abdicate, your cousin becomes king and potentially starts a war with Earth. Exactly. The military faction believes humans are weak and that Zephyrian technology gives us overwhelming tactical advantages. They see your colonial expansion as an opportunity for conquest rather than cooperation. But if you marry someone from Earth, Jake said, following the political logic, it signals peaceful intentions and strengthens the trade faction's position. While also satisfying the constitutional requirement for a royal consort, Lasara confirmed. Your diplomatic status makes you technically eligible for political marriage, and your presence here today provided me with an opportunity one couldn't afford to miss. Jake looked at the ring again, feeling the subtle warmth that seemed to pulse in rhythm with Lasara's emotions. So this is purely political. A marriage of convenience to prevent a war. It's complicated, Lasara said, and Jake caught another flutter of emotion through their connection, something warmer and more personal than political calculation. I chose you specifically, Jake. Because I happened to be in the right place at the right time. Because your diplomatic reports over the past 2 years have shown genuine understanding and respect for Zephyrian culture, Lasara said. Most human officials view us as useful aliens with advanced technology. You write about us as people with complex motivations and legitimate concerns. Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks. You've read my diplomatic reports. All of them. Your analysis of our trade preferences, your observations about our social customs, your recommendations for improved cooperation. They demonstrate a level of cultural awareness that's rare among your species. Before Jake could respond to what was either a compliment or a diplomatic insult, the chamber's entrance chimed with an incoming visitor. The crystalline wall became transparent, revealing Prince Valerian accompanied by several court nobles whose robes displayed military faction insignia. Your Majesty, Prince Valerian said, his voice carrying through the chamber's communication system, the court requests an audience to discuss the unexpected developments regarding your recent engagement. Jake looked at Lasara, whose eyes had shifted to a dangerous red. Through their empathic connection, he felt her quick spike of anger followed immediately by controlled determination. Let them in, she said quietly. Time to see how good your acting abilities are, Jake. My what now? You're about to meet the man who wants to start a war with your people, Lasara said, standing and resuming her regal bearing as the chamber wall opened to admit their visitors. Try to look like a devoted fiancé rather than a confused courier. Prince Valerian entered with the confidence of someone accustomed to having his political opinions respected. He was tall, even by Zephyrian standards, with the silver hair of the royal family and eyes that held steady at an intimidating gold. His formal robes incorporated military honors alongside royal insignia, and Jake's diplomatic instincts immediately classified him as someone used to getting his way through a combination of authority and implied threat. Cousin, Valerian said, offering Lasara a bow that managed to be technically correct while suggesting minimal respect. Congratulations on your sudden engagement. How fortunate that Earth's diplomatic corps was available for such an immediate alliance. Thank you, Valerian, Lasara replied with the sweetness that Jake was learning meant she was probably planning something unpleasant for whoever had annoyed her. Captain Sullivan and I are very pleased with how quickly our governments were able to arrange this partnership. Valorian's attention shifted to Jake, and those golden eyes seemed to catalog every detail of his appearance with predatory precision. Captain Sullivan. How remarkable that a simple courier was authorized to negotiate marriage alliances. Jake felt Lasara's tension through their empathic link and realized this was the moment where he either supported her deception or exposed them both to whatever consequences followed. The Earth Colonial Alliance values flexibility in our diplomatic approach, he said, hoping his voice carried more confidence than he felt. When opportunities for beneficial partnerships arise, we're prepared to act decisively. How efficient, Valerian said, his tone suggesting he found human efficiency distasteful. I trust you'll be able to provide documentation of this sudden authorization. Jake felt Lasara's emotions shift through their connection, a flash of panic quickly suppressed by desperate hope. They were trapped between exposure and deception, with the political future of two species hanging on Jake's next words. The documentation will be available once our formal communications reach Earth, Jake said, making the kind of diplomatic commitment that would either save them or destroy his career. The alliance was approved through emergency authorization protocols. It was a complete fabrication, but it bought them time, assuming anyone believed it. Valorian's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, one of his military faction supporters stepped forward. Your Majesty, the court requests proof that this alliance is legitimate according to traditional bonding customs. Jake looked at Lasara, whose eyes had gone completely silver. Through their ring connection, he felt her realization that their troubles were just beginning. The next 3 days of Jake's life unfolded like a diplomatic training simulation designed by someone with a sadistic sense of humor and unlimited access to alien cultural databases. Zephyrian courtship customs, he discovered, were both elaborate and specifically designed to verify the authenticity of romantic bonds, which posed obvious challenges when the romance in question existed primarily in the realm of political necessity. Tomorrow is the ceremony of resonant hearts, Lasara explained as they walked through the palace gardens, followed at a discreet distance by both loyal guards and political observers. It's a traditional ritual where bonded couples share surface thoughts and emotions through a ceremonial mind meld. Jake paused beside a crystalline fountain that somehow produced music as water flowed through its carved channels. Define surface thoughts in this context. Current emotions, immediate concerns, general intentions. Nothing deeply personal, but enough to verify that partners are genuinely connected rather than politically convenient, Lasara said. The court will expect to see evidence of real affection. And if they don't? Then Prince Valerian will have grounds to challenge the legitimacy of our engagement and demand my abdication. Jake watched the musical fountain cycle through what sounded like a particularly melancholy Zephyrian composition. No pressure at all. Over the past 3 days, they'd navigated an increasingly complex series of traditional protocols designed to test their supposed relationship. The Feast of Shared Stories had required them to recount their courtship to assembled nobles, forcing Jake to improvise a romantic narrative based on diplomatic correspondence while Lasara added embellishments that made their fictional relationship sound both plausible and appropriately dramatic. The exchange of personal gifts had been easier. Jake had given Lasara a small earth crystal he'd carried as a paperweight, while she presented him with a Zephyrian translation device that she claimed held sentimental value. The gifts were modest enough to seem authentic while avoiding anything too intimate for their actual relationship. But the ceremony of resonant hearts would be different. Mind melds couldn't be faked, and Jake was beginning to understand why Valerian had specifically requested this particular tradition. Jake, Lasara said, settling onto a bench carved from what appeared to be living crystal, there's something I need to tell you about tomorrow's ceremony. The empathic ring pulsed with an emotion Jake was learning to recognize as Lasara's version of nervous anticipation. What kind of something? The mind meld is designed to be comprehensive. When Zephyrians bond, we share not just surface thoughts but deeper emotional experiences. The ceremony will reveal whether our connection is genuine. Define deeper emotional experiences, Jake said, though he suspected he wasn't going to like the answer. Memories, feelings, the emotional context behind our actions, Lasara explained. The kind of sharing that only happens between people who truly care about each other. Jake looked at her profile, noting the way afternoon light caught the silver threads in her hair and made her luminous skin seem to glow from within. Over the past few days, he'd found himself paying attention to details that went beyond diplomatic observation, the way she hummed softly when she was thinking, how her eyes shifted to blue when she was genuinely amused by something, the careful way she considered other people's feelings before making decisions. Lasara, he said carefully, what happens if the ceremony reveals that we're not exactly what we've claimed to be? Then Valerian wins, she said simply. I abdicate, he becomes king, and the military faction gets their war with Earth. Through their empathic connection, Jake felt the weight of responsibility Lasara carried, not just for her own future, but for the peace between their species. The political pressure, the constant vigilance, the loneliness of making decisions that affected millions of lives. There might be another option, Jake said slowly. What kind of option? What if the ceremony revealed genuine feelings that neither of us expected? Lasara turned to look at him directly, her eyes shifting through several colors before settling on a warm amber. Jake, are you saying? I'm saying that I've spent 3 days getting to know you, and what I've discovered has nothing to do with political necessity, Jake said. You're brilliant, compassionate, funny when you think no one important is listening, and you care more about your people's welfare than your own comfort. Those are the observations of someone who pays attention, Lasara said softly. Those are the feelings of someone who started caring about you beyond the requirements of fake engagement, Jake corrected. The empathic ring pulsed with something warm and complex, surprise mixed with relief and what might have been hope. The mind meld will reveal whatever emotional connection actually exists between us, Lasara said. If we've developed genuine feelings, then we're not faking anything, Jake finished. We're just discovering something that happened while we were pretending. The next morning, the ceremony of resonant hearts took place in the palace's most sacred space, a chamber carved entirely from a single enormous crystal that amplified telepathic connections. The assembled court included representatives from every major political faction, with Prince Valerian positioned prominently among the observers. The ceremony requires you to touch the heart crystal while maintaining physical contact with each other, the high priest explained. The crystal will amplify your emotional resonance so the court can witness the depth of your bond. Jake and Lasara approached the central crystal, which stood nearly twice their height and pulsed with internal light that seemed to respond to their presence. As Jake placed his hand on its surface, he felt the empathic connection from their rings expand exponentially. Suddenly, he was experiencing Lasara's memories alongside his own, her childhood in the palace, the weight of assuming the crown at a young age, her determination to lead with wisdom rather than force. But beneath those surface experiences, he felt something deeper, her genuine loneliness, her careful hope that someone might see past her royal role to appreciate who she was as a person. And from Lasara's perspective, Jake felt his own emotional journey reflected back. His initial confusion at being thrust into royal politics, his growing admiration for her intelligence and strength, his surprising protective instincts when he saw the pressure she faced from political opponents. The court watched in fascination as the heart crystal blazed with increasing light, displaying their emotional resonance for everyone to witness. What they saw wasn't the shallow connection of a political arrangement, but the complex, growing bond between two people who had discovered unexpected compatibility in impossible circumstances. The bond is genuine, the high priest announced, and Jake heard murmurs of approval from the trade faction nobles. But Prince Valerian stepped forward, his expression dark with frustration. The ceremony proves emotional connection, but it doesn't verify the legitimacy of Earth's authorization for this alliance. I formally challenge Captain Sullivan to prove his commitment through the trial of devotion. Jake felt Lasara's spike of alarm through their connection. The trial of devotion is dangerous, she said quietly. It requires navigating the crystal maze while telepathically connected to your partner's emotions. Many couples fail, and failure can be harmful. Define harmful, Jake said, though he was beginning to suspect he wasn't going to like this answer either. Psychic trauma that can damage your ability to form emotional connections, Lasara said. Valerian is counting on you being too afraid to attempt it, or too inexperienced to succeed. Jake looked at the assembled court, at Prince Valorian's confident expression, at Lasara's worried but hopeful face. Their fake engagement had become something real, but now they had to prove it through a trial that could destroy their ability to care about anyone ever again. I accept the challenge, Jake said, and felt Lasara's mixture of pride and terror echo through their connection. The crystal maze stretched before them like a three-dimensional puzzle made of living light and impossible geometry. As Jake stepped into its shifting corridors, telepathically linked to Lasara's emotions, he realized that the most dangerous part might not be the maze itself, but discovering just how deep his feelings for the alien queen had become. The crystal maze existed in a space that seemed to operate by rules that made quantum physics look straightforward and user-friendly. Jake found himself navigating corridors that shifted between dimensions, stairways that led upward while somehow depositing him on lower levels, and chambers where the only exit required him to solve puzzles based on Lasara's emotional responses to childhood memories he was experiencing secondhand through their telepathic link. The path forward depends on understanding your partner's deepest motivations, the High Priest had explained before Jake entered the maze. Navigate by following emotional resonance rather than physical logic. Jake was beginning to understand why so many couples failed this trial. The maze wasn't testing physical endurance or problem-solving skills, it was demanding a level of emotional intimacy that most relationships took years to develop. And he had to achieve it while the entire Zephyrian court watched through crystalline viewing screens, with Prince Valerian waiting for him to fail spectacularly. Through their telepathic connection, Jake felt Lasara's presence like a guiding star in the shifting chaos of the maze. Her emotions provided navigation points, warmth when he moved in the right direction, anxiety when he approached dead ends, and a growing sense of amazement as he successfully interpreted her feelings to solve each challenge. "You're doing better than I expected," Lasara's voice came through their link, tinged with both relief and something deeper. "I'm cheating," Jake replied, pausing in a chamber where the walls displayed shifting patterns that seemed to represent her memories. "I've been paying attention to your emotions for days. I know what your determination feels like, what your worry tastes like, how your happiness changes the color of the empathic connection." "That's not cheating," Lasara said softly. "That's exactly what the trial is designed to measure." Jake navigated through a corridor that required him to identify which of 7 identical paths led forward by recognizing which one felt like Lasara's approach to difficult decisions, methodical, compassionate, but ultimately decisive. He'd watched her use that same emotional pattern during court negotiations, and the familiarity of it guided him to the correct choice. But as he progressed deeper into the maze, Jake began to sense something else through their connection, Lasara's growing fear that their relationship, however genuine it had become, was still built on the foundation of political necessity rather than free choice. "Lasara," he said, stopping in a chamber that seemed to pulse with crystalline heartbeat rhythms, "what happens after this trial? Assuming I don't fail catastrophically and damage our brains." "If you succeed, the court will accept our engagement as legitimate," she replied. "Valorian's challenge will be answered, and the succession crisis will be resolved." "That's not what I'm asking," Jake said. "I'm asking what happens to us. Do we go through with a political marriage? Do I spend the rest of my life as a fake consort to prevent a war?" Through their telepathic link, Jake felt Lasara's emotional response, a complex mixture of hope, fear, guilt, and something that felt remarkably like love. "Jake," she said, her mental voice carrying vulnerability that her royal training would never allow her to show publicly, "would it still be fake if we both wanted it to be real?" The maze responded to their emotional connection by opening a path that led directly to the center chamber, where the trial of devotion would reach its conclusion. But as Jake approached the final challenge, alarms began echoing through the palace's crystal communication system. Emergency session of the High Council, came the announcement. Evidence has been discovered regarding the legitimacy of the marriage alliance. Jake felt Lasara's spike of panic through their connection. Valerian found something, she said. He's going to expose us before you can complete the trial. What kind of something? Probably communication records showing that Earth never authorized a marriage alliance, Lasara said grimly. If he presents that evidence to the High Council, it won't matter whether you succeed in the maze. Jake reached the center chamber, where a final crystal waited to complete the trial of devotion. According to tradition, touching it while maintaining their telepathic connection would prove their bond was strong enough to survive the challenges of royal life. But outside, Prince Valerian was preparing to destroy everything they'd built together. Jake, Lasara said, you could leave. Return to Earth as a diplomatic courier who got caught up in alien politics beyond his control. Your government would understand. And you would abdicate to prevent civil war, Jake said. Valerian would become king and probably attack human colonies within a year. But you'd be safe. Jake placed his hand on the final crystal, feeling their telepathic connection expand to include not just emotions but deeper thoughts and intentions. Through that link, he shared with Lasara a decision he was making in real time. Actually, he said, both aloud and through their mental connection, I have a better idea. Jake activated his diplomatic communication device, using emergency protocols to contact Earth's Colonial Diplomatic Corps. Admiral Chen, this is Captain Sullivan requesting emergency diplomatic authorization, he said, his voice carrying both through the communication device and into the crystal chamber where his words would be recorded for the court. Jake. Admiral Chen's voice crackled through the subspace connection, tinged with confusion. What kind of authorization? Your mission was simple trade negotiation. Sir, I'm requesting formal authority to negotiate a political marriage alliance with Queen Lasara of the Zephyrian Royal House, Jake said, feeling Lasara's shock echo through their telepathic connection. The alliance would prevent a military coup that could destabilize the entire sector and lead to war with human colonies. The silence from Earth stretched long enough for Jake to complete the trial of devotion crystal contact, their combined emotional resonance blazing through the chamber in patterns that the observing court would interpret as profound romantic connection. Captain Sullivan, Admiral Chen said finally, are you requesting authorization for an alliance that already exists, or for one you're negotiating in real time? The latter, sir, Jake said, making a choice that would either save both their careers or end them spectacularly. The situation has evolved beyond the original mission parameters, and immediate action is required to prevent significant political destabilization. Through their connection, Jake felt Lasara's amazement at his willingness to risk everything for her people's welfare, and for their relationship. And your assessment of this alliance's strategic value? Admiral Chen asked. The Zephyrians possess advanced crystalline technology that could revolutionize human industry, Jake said, drawing on his months of diplomatic observation. Queen Lasara leads the faction that favors peaceful cooperation over military expansion. A marriage alliance would cement peaceful relations while providing Earth with access to technology that could benefit billions of people. Furthermore, Jake continued, feeling Lasara's growing hope through their bond, I can personally attest to Queen Lasara's character, intelligence, and commitment to peaceful resolution of conflicts. This alliance would be beneficial to both species. Admiral Chen's response came with the weight of someone making decisions that would affect interstellar policy. Captain Sullivan, you are hereby granted emergency diplomatic authority to formalize the marriage alliance, contingent on formal ratification by both governments. Jake felt Lasara's relief and joy flood through their telepathic connection, but also her concern for what he was sacrificing. Jake, she said through their mental link, you just committed your entire future to an alien queen you've known for less than a week. I committed my future to someone I've come to love, Jake corrected. The alien queen part is just interesting bonus complexity. The crystal chamber's viewing screens displayed their successful completion of the trial of devotion to the assembled court, but before anyone could celebrate, Prince Valerian burst into the chamber accompanied by his military faction supporters. Your Majesty, Valerian announced with barely controlled fury, I have evidence that this entire alliance is fraudulent. Earth's government has no record of authorizing any marriage negotiations. Actually, Jake said, standing and still maintaining contact with the trial crystal, Earth's government just authorized the alliance through emergency diplomatic protocols. Admiral Chen, would you please confirm the authorization for Prince Valorian's benefit? Admiral Chen's voice carried through the chamber with official authority. This is Admiral Chen of Earth's Colonial Diplomatic Corps. Captain Jake Sullivan has been granted full diplomatic authority to negotiate and formalize a marriage alliance with Queen Lysara of the Zephyrian Royal House, effective immediately. Valorian's expression shifted through several colors of political frustration as his primary argument evaporated in real time. The marriage alliance stands, Queen Lysara announced to the court, her voice carrying royal authority strengthened by genuine emotion. Captain Sullivan has successfully completed the trial of devotion, Earth has provided formal authorization, and our bond has been verified according to all traditional customs. The court erupted in a mixture of cheers from the trade faction and frustrated murmurs from Valorian's military supporters, but the succession crisis was officially resolved. Later, in the privacy of Lysara's chambers, Jake found himself contemplating the most unexpected career change in diplomatic history. So, he said, examining the bonding ring that now seemed to pulse in rhythm with both their heartbeats, I'm officially engaged to an alien queen, committed to living on a planet where the furniture grows itself, and responsible for maintaining peace between two species. Having second thoughts? Lysara asked, settling beside him on the self-forming crystalline couch. About the political alliance? Never, Jake said. About spending my life with someone who's brilliant, beautiful, and apparently capable of solving succession crises through creative interpretation of ancient marriage laws? Also never. Even though it means leaving Earth permanently. Giving up your old life. Jake looked around the crystal chamber, then at Lysara's face where her eyes had settled into a warm, steady amber that he was learning meant contentment. I'm not giving up my old life, he said. I'm starting a better one. Besides, someone needs to document humans' Ephirian cultural integration from the inside. Might as well be the guy who accidentally became royal consort. Accidentally? Lysara asked, her eyes shifting to an amused silver. Fine, Jake admitted, the guy who chose to become royal consort because he fell in love with a queen who was brave enough to risk everything for her people's future. Their wedding 3 months later was attended by delegations from both species, with Admiral Chen serving as Jake's best man and expressing amazement that a simple trade mission had resulted in the most strategically valuable marriage alliance in human history. As Jake and Lysara exchanged vows in both human and Zephyrian traditions, he reflected that the universe had an interesting sense of humor about bringing people together, even if it required succession crises, telepathic trials, and emergency diplomatic authorizations to make it happen. The golden ring on his finger pulsed with warmth as Lysara's emotions flowed through their permanent telepathic connection, carrying love, joy, and the shared certainty that what had begun as political necessity had evolved into something far more precious, a partnership built on mutual respect, genuine affection, and the kind of love that could bridge the gap between worlds.